Hello, and welcome to another episode of Third Chances. Today, my guest is Sharon Ann Rose. She's an author, poet, and ceremonialist who liberates feminine wisdom. She helps women walk through life transitions into their body's innate wisdom and medicine. She's the author and co-author of 3 books that explore a woman's wild heart and sacred earth connection. Sharon lives in Portland, Oregon, on an urban farm with her 3 boys and life partners. Sharon, welcome to my podcast. That's
Oh,
so
thank
much fun to
you.
see you.
Thank you. It's so good to reconnect with
We
you.
have been on a few calls before and we connected really. And I did admit to you that I'm not this very spiritual person, but I learned to start understanding the dynamics more because they make sense in our life.
Mhm.
But we just, before I started recording, I kind of commented on your name because the Sharon Ann Rose, it's such a beautiful poetic name.
Mhm.
So there is a story behind it. Tell me about that.
Yes. So when I was younger, it's at that like teen, developmental stage. I think I was probably 11 or 12 and, going through that time of like, why did my parents name me this? It's a time when you're really trying to separate from your parents. You're wanting to be your own person. And I was like, I hate the name Sharon. And I used to try to write it out differently. And instead of SH at the beginning, I remember I tried to do CH, and no one took me seriously at all. And so one day, I think I was pretty tender and emotional. And I went to my mom and said, why did you name me Sharon? I hate this name. And she said, sweetheart, I named you after a flower. I named you after a rose, and it's the Rose of Sharon. And the irony is, when she first said that, I had no idea what the Rose of Sharon looked like.
Me neither.
And and my birth land, is on the East Coast of the United States, and there are actually tons of roses of Sharon all around. And it wasn't until she brought it into my consciousness, and then as I got older, I brought that name on as my author name, and when I published my first book, and then as my business name. And suddenly I started seeing roses of Sharon everywhere. And
I'm loving it.
at
Yeah.
our former house, I even planted one right outside the bedroom window. And then when we moved, I actually just put one in our backyard now too, because it's just so nice for me to have that as a very physical memory of what I'm
Yeah,
named after.
it's your flower, basically. But
Totally.
you
And it's quite
mentioned,
wild.
yeah,
It's a
you
wild
mentioned
rose.
Eastern homeland. What did you mean by that?
So I'm on the west coast of the United States now. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon, and I was
Mm.
born and raised in Massachusetts. So I grew
Okay.
up on the Western Massachusetts in the Berkshires, and then we moved to Central Massachusetts, about an hour south of Boston.
So,
And
sorry. Yeah.
yeah, and I was going to say the roses of Sharon, they're all over the coastal region of Massachusetts, like by Cape
See,
Cod and all of that. They're everywhere. They're kind of
I
like a
have to look. I
wildflower.
have to look up for it now because I lived in Connecticut for 10 years. That's very close, and
Yes.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't looking for it. Of course, we
Mhm.
always see what we're looking for, but that's interesting. It's a beautiful
Mhm.
story.
Mhm.
So Sharon,
Mhm.
as a girl, not happy with her name. That kind of changed later. But give me a little insight of what was going on in your mind. What were you looking to become? What was important to you at that time? What were you planning to be when you grow up? So tell me,
Mhm.
what was your beginning looking like?
It's beautiful to phrase it that way. Yeah, so I was born very, very sensitive. And so being around people was actually very hard on me, but no one would have known it. I remember my sister saying, whenever you come into a room, you just light up the room. I tended to be more quiet, but very like smiling. And it was almost like I had this inner mission that wasn't necessarily one I was crafting in my mind, but it was to bring people happiness. really deep happiness. And it was really challenging for me because my family system and people around me, it was like I could feel the pain and the sadness of others. And it was very heavy on my heart. So I would go from a young age. My mom even said, it was like maybe I was 2, 3. I would walk out the door on my own. And we had this lovely, back then it looked like a mountain. When I go, home to my homeland, it's like a hill now, but I would walk out the door on my own and go sit on the hillside and just sit with the trees and sit with the animals and the creatures and the grass, because it regulated something in me that I didn't at that time have an understanding of. But it also allowed that heavy density to just be absorbed back into the earth, and to allow me to, kind of keep going and keep that smile on my face, and be true to what I felt was this inner mission of bring happiness to others. And ironically, my Polish, so I'm Polish, and we've connected on this whole Eastern European heritage, but my last name is Wesołowski, which means happy circle.
Right.
And so when I found that out, it was almost like, oh, see, it's like everything was confirming you must bring happiness to others. And when I was young, it was almost like it was even at the expense of my own happiness.
That's what it was like. I was going to ask, because while you probably didn't understand that mission when you were a young child, it was actually heavy on you, right? It was,
Yeah.
you were seeking intuitively the nature to kind of bring you the center back. That's really interesting. So how did you figure out what to do with it?
Oh, I think it's an ongoing journey. It's been a lifetime, and will probably be until the day I die, of learning how to navigate, what that means. And mostly as I've grown, I've learned to definitely always turn towards the earth and my earth connection. And it's been a huge proponent, of who I am and what my daily life is. And so it's ironic, because wherever I've lived, I always have a really beautiful natural area near me. And even though I'm conscious of like, oh, I want to live somewhere, where nature is close by, I'm also not, but it always shows up. And there's usually water, because water is really important for my well-being. And again, it helps just move things for me. I'm able to enter a different space. And so I've just always gravitated towards that, and very instinctually. It was never something like someone told me, oh, to ground, you need to go do this. It was literally my body would be drawn to places on the earth, in nature, on my own, where I would sit. I would often cry a lot, and give those tears and the heaviness that I couldn't understand into the water, into the stream, into the soil. And so I was doing ritual without even knowing about ritual from a very young age. And it's what saved me. It's what kept me sane. And then once I got married, we lived across the street from 16 acres of forest. It was so beautiful. And whenever my husband and I would have a huge argument or something, I was just drawn like to the trees. And people would say like, oh, do you guys go to a marriage counselor? We certainly have at times. But I was like, it's the trees that help me. Like, these are my greatest counselors. They show me how to give it over, how to let it go, how to lean in. I would literally lean up against the trees for support, and to understand something much bigger than me is holding me, So.
Yeah, I think we have such a little appreciation of nature when you think of it, because we so take it for granted that it's there and it's luscious and it's there. And no matter if we do anything with it or don't do anything with it, it's just there. And many people learn to spend more time in nature and recharge their batteries. But for you as a young girl, what did you do with all this? What did you wanted to do with your life as far as a profession goes?
Yeah, so I was a prolific writer. And that for me was kind of the way that I connected with a higher power and a universal intelligence and God, goddess. And so I would write, and from a young age, even my mom kept the things that I turned in, for assignments and things at school, or I loved writing poetry. And back then it was pretty corny, but, it's evolved certainly since then. But it was the way that I just like let everything through. And, I could hear a wisdom that was other than me coming through me. And I was very conscious of that, but in a younger way, of like, oh, and I called it God at that time, and still probably to this day I can call it God, but it was that, it was like, oh, something's happening where I open up and something more than me comes through, and I have the opportunity to put that down. And so that was really, and that was more for me than anyone else, and it was pretty, private, and I would prolifically fill up journals and diaries and things with these,
That was actually a question that came to my mind. Did you have understanding from your parents or people around you about this, or were you really on your own?
Yeah, I felt pretty on my own. There was my paternal grandmother who we never consciously spoke about things, but she had this presence that was, it sort of wrapped up that part of me. It touched it, without us directly speaking about anything at all. And my family was pretty interesting. There was a whole mystical slant, and they were very, very religious, Roman Catholic, Polish, like just deep heritage. So I saw a lot around me of people praying and being very faith oriented, and giving things, to a higher spirit. And that moved me and touched me. And then I'll never forget, it was probably around that 12, 13-year-old time, one of my uncles, my paternal uncle, married this amazing woman who had a lot of psychic gifts. She was Native American and just so richly wise. And I remember there was like, she saw me and I could feel that she saw me, when you just know someone sees more than just the surface, and
Connected, yeah.
yeah, and that they see your soul. And I remember she said something like, Sharon, you're either going to become an astronaut or a detective, and it took time for me to really sink into what that meant symbolically, that she could see I have this piercing, x-ray vision that just goes straight into someone to really see with their essence as well. Or I'm like, was traveling to other realms and dimensions, like to the stars, in my own psyche and dreams. And so that piece really touched me. And otherwise, yeah, I was really on my own, and after my paternal grandmother died, she died when I was around 10. Her presence was really, really strong. So I began to lean into that and just knew, that I could call upon her, even though she was beyond the veil. And then as I grew, I just gravitated, especially later in high school, towards more spiritual teachings, teachers, books, etc. And then just began my quest for
you were exploring
understanding
right away. That's
yeah.
fabulous. Yeah, I find it very, very important when, whether you call it religion or higher power or universe or whatever, it is helping to get some weight off our shoulders when we can look upon some higher power. And for some people, when I see that they kind of dismiss religion because it's ridiculous, whatever it is, if you believe that you are the center of the universe and it's all up to you, that's incredibly heavy. So any help with that, it's definitely, positive when you can kind of release that all the problems of the world that you have to solve, because the awareness that you are not alone for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the way you phrase that, because it really is beyond anything. It's beyond religion. It's beyond spirituality. I feel like it's one of the most humane things to have a connection with, that which we must actually very individually name. I think I didn't really understand until I became a mother and I watched my kids and I was like, oh my God, like how spiritual we are when we are born. And it is so basic it's so ordinary, it's so magical, it's so concrete. You know what I mean? It's so part of your daily life, and it's not separated where, you're off on a mountaintop, though you can be. And so I really began then to realize how important it was for me to make this very intimate, very personal, and to call it what I was going to call it, and bring it into my life in that more mundane way, and not have it be like something so special or that you only do, when you're in a meditation hall or a church or a synagogue, but to really realize I wanted to live with this relationship deep inside of me and have it be personal.
I love that you didn't fight it, because some people, because it could be heavy on them at the beginning because they don't quite understand what it means, and just the idea that I'm here to bring happiness to others can be really heavy. And some people try to deny it because others look at them as weirdos, or, what's wrong with you? You went on a mission to kind of build on it, to understand. You were linked to things that made more and more sense to you, which is fascinating journey for me. So first was the connection to trees and the nature. What else was helping you to develop these skills?
It's funny because I was just thinking about this, going back to like, what did I want to be? And I wanted to be a fashion designer.
Okay. Yeah, why not? It's very
And
creative.
so it's very creative. And the other place was, the phrase of learning to feel at home in your own skin. It was often one with me. And even as I would do, writing, it was like, I don't feel at home in my own skin. And there was something about designing clothes and like putting on this layer of, beauty and fashion, and the way we express ourselves, that began to plug me into what is it that could help me feel at home in my own skin.
Hmm.
And that, for some reason, yeah, and I used to just draw beautiful clothes that I wanted to create and sew, and there was something about that helped me realize that my body was here, and it had definition, and it had edges, and it had boundaries. And I don't think I really understood, no one taught me I had boundaries, or that I could use them, or that I had a right to say no to things, and that I could say, yeah, like, this is me, that's you, I'm not I'm not responsible for you. And ultimately it's taken me a long time, but to learn I can't make anybody happy. And that's been the most liberating, thing, to realize I can be in happiness and I can exude happiness, and others can be touched by that. They can be inspired by that. They can ask me questions about how I found, inner happiness. But I put down that job description a while ago.
Yeah,
Certainly midlife caused me to do that too, to like,
because ultimately it's everyone's own responsibility to be happy. If you find it in yourself to see things negatively or positively, it's ultimately your only choice, because nobody can do it for you. And that's probably the never ending search for happiness, when we search outside of ourselves. If I go and do this, I'll be happy. If I get this new job, I'll be happy. If I travel to this place, I'll be happy. If I get promotion, then I'll be happy. It is, how is it? It's not really there, is it?
yeah. Yeah, and the reality, the biggest honesty I can say is we have to touch our unhappiness and be able to walk with it before we can truly be happy.
Hmm.
And I think, so many things teach us otherwise. Like you're saying, it's like they think we can step over being uncomfortable, that we can just like be happy in our own skin. Not so much. Like, we're just learning as a culture. We're still pretty young to this like deep seated acceptance of who we are for who we are. We're still very much in a, let's change that, let's make it better, let's transform it. And that has a place, but that really deep abiding happiness that we can walk with inside, it requires befriending our unhappiness and saying, yeah, when you rise up in me, I'm just going to meet you. I'll just greet you. I'll walk with you. I'll hold you. I'll accept you. And it doesn't define me. It's just the human condition, and that's okay. And that's happiness, you know, for me, that's really being happy because I'm being honest with myself about how I feel.
And I think it's the acceptance that came to my mind when you were saying that, the acceptance with who I am, what I feel, I'm entitled to feel. I have emotions that arise that may need the time to process, but it's me. I accept me the way I am. And that's so hard for especially many women in life, because the social norms and the expectations and the natural feel like we have to help everybody else and don't care about ourselves. What do you see? What helped you when you finally realized you have to take care of yourself before you can help somebody else? What was some of the things that you were doing for yourself, learning how to be accepting of yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, that too. It's an ever unfolding process that I get deeper and deeper with, get more and more honest with. And in the beginning, you know, I actually was always kind of a badass. I was thrown into having to set boundaries at a pretty young age due to some dynamics in my family. And so that was hard on me. I didn't like it. I didn't like having to be like, I need to cut you out of my life because being in your presence is so uncomfortable. And you know, but that was self-care. It was self-care to realize that I couldn't do anything about other people. I could only, you know, truly care for my own space and put boundaries around that and let people in who were going to be mutually respectful and not, you know, literally project all their misery onto me.
Yeah.
So that was probably one of the first things I learned about true self-care, you know, and that came first at a young age. And then, you know, with that came, oh, that question that always is kind of thrumming in the background of my psyche of where do you feel most at home in your own skin? Where do you feel most natural? And then giving that to myself. And that's often in nature. That's often, you know, in circles of women. I just feel so, you know, like I can be who I am and be seen for who I am, and I don't have to hide um, or prove something.
Mm.
And then, you know, laying on the other things like how do you eat and how do you want to eat and how do you move and how do you want to move and just bringing in, you know, all these different things over the years. My sort of date, I have so many rhythms and rituals and things that I do for self-care on a regular basis, and they change as I age, they change in the seasons, they change depending on, you know, my own dynamics as a mother with my kids and their ages and what's going on, or with my partnership and my marriage. um, and that's honest, you know. And then they do get impacted also by the ups and downs of life. You know, when I hit a really tough time, I have to amp up that self-care. And you know, I've always been into holistic practices and health, so I lean a lot into those kinds of rituals and like self massage and, you know, really doing things that allow me to get present to who I am. I do a lot with breath work, meditation, um, and then things like biking, you know, and working out and all of that.
So you mentioned you mentioned your children, and of course your marriage and partnership. Did you find understanding? Did you find a partner that has a deep understanding of who you are and how it impacts everything? Or do you have to sometimes fight for your space in that
Mhm.
relationship? Because I know it's not always fully understood by
Mm,
people that may have a little closer minded. And I'm not talking about your husband only, but
mm,
maybe
mm,
close friends.
mm, mm. Yeah, I feel super blessed that it's all of it. You know, it's um, one, I'm in a partnership where I am seen for who I am. I am, you know, deeply respected in ways that oftentimes I couldn't even give respect to myself for, you know what I mean? And something that's coming to mind is I remember it was, maybe 10 or so years ago, and I was lamenting of like, oh, my boys don't really see me, and oh, my boys, I don't know if I'm actually teaching them the things that are most important to me and what I value. And I remember my husband turning to me and he said, are you kidding? He said, everything you value is all around us. He's like, you have altars that you don't even realize all over the house that the boys are being touched by. And the way that have us do family ceremonies all the time. And it was an important thing because I, again, was just undermining who I am and my
Yeah.
impact on my family. And especially as a woman with all males in my house, it's an interesting dynamic, especially as everybody gets older, and at times it can feel a little like we're on opposite sides of the fence, and it can be interesting. So there's that, and I do feel really held. And then there's the honesty that as I grow and change, I am always having to, and I wish I too could use a different word than fight for my rights or fight for my space, but there's an honesty about that, about where we are culturally and socially of, yeah, I always have to stand up for myself. And sometimes I don't do it very gracefully. I could do it more because, for example, everyone in my home loves me and wants me to thrive, but I forget that. And I can feel like we're adversaries and I've got to fight for it and take it. And then I get to learn like, oh, you can be softer about that while also making sure you're using your voice and speaking up. And again, I feel really fortunate that my husband has definitely gotten the brunt of my using my voice more so maybe than others. So,
but it's fascinating that you have 3 boys, because I think that would be a great role model for them to grow into more sensitive men towards their partnerships in the future of their lives. That feminine energy at home that was very pronounced teaches them how to treat other women or how to be around women, and in the friendships and everything. I think it's very, I would not underestimate the role model, because children usually don't do what we say, but they do what they see. And that I would agree with your husband that you must have an impact because of the way you are. It's just, it's that there's certain peacefulness coming from you. And I know it's not always sunshine and butterflies. We all have days. But when you are kind of aware of what's going on and you can take yourself back to some peaceful ground and ground yourself. and I just remember in your bio, you mentioned you're living on an urban farm in Oregon. I only know Oregon. I have seen some pictures and I love the sceneries, and I know that they make exquisite wine in Oregon because I used to be in wine business. But tell me a little more about what attracted you to go there.
So it was my husband, at the time. We were in a relationship. We had been maybe dating a year, and his dad passed away. He had originally, Peter, my husband, had come out to the East Coast, which is where I was, because his father had cancer and he had been really caring for him quite a bit. And he was about 24 at the time. So we met at a school called the Perkins School for the Blind and worked with children who were deaf and blind. And so my husband came out there sort of as a time just to refuel and reboot because he had been giving so much energy to his father. And we met out there, and then his father passed away about a year after, and so he wanted to come back to the Pacific Northwest and be there for his mom. He's the youngest of 5 boys. I'm the youngest of 4 girls. And so when he said, you know what, I'm going to move back for a while. And I said, you know what, I want to go with you. I want to support you and, be there for you at this time. And so I moved out, and that was 27 years ago. And here we are, and we're now married, and we have 3 kids. And
that was Oregon you moved to?
Yeah. Yep. From the East Coast.
Yeah. No, it's definitely for someone who loves nature, it's a beautiful piece of land for sure.
Yeah.
And so when you say urban farm, how does it look like? Do you have your own animals? Do you grow
Mhm.
food? All of it?
Yeah. 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 So we had a much bigger urban farm. Ours now is a bit smaller, but yes, we have vegetables and vegetable gardens, fruit, trees, we have flowers, we have chickens and bees and rabbit and a turtle.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's a fun little spot.
So that's your little paradise. Do kids
Mhm.
enjoy it too?
Mhm.
Working with the nature?
They do. They do. Yeah. The two older ones were definitely raised a bit differently. We lived on a much bigger urban farm across from, forest on a very quiet part of the city. Um, and we homeschooled them and, we were out in the woods every day. So, my youngest has been a little bit more involved, certainly, and the social world of his peers, etc. So it's interesting to watch that influence as well.
Do they love each other? Do they have great dynamic between themselves?
They do. Yeah, they're very, very close. And, they fight for sure. And
Hmm.
there's big spaces between them. So the eldest is 25, youngest 13. So they've got what, 13 years difference.
Wow.
And then the middle son is 20. And so he and the youngest are 7 years difference. And yeah, it's pretty fascinating to watch their dynamics and to see the olders are both almost fatherly and also brotherly, that piece. And to watch the youngest just always want to be much older than he is and
Of
to
course, we all did.
strive and drive himself, to yeah. So
So that's funny. I keep referring to them as kids. They are men. They are grown-up men. Are they the oldest out of the house, or are they still?
they're all in the house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, you have some great guardianship then. Guard the security guards around you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're all taller than me. My youngest I went, oh my God, I think you're taller than me at 13. So, yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
they truly are like guard men.
So let's go back to what you do today with all that wisdom and all that talent and intuition that you developed over the years. A ceremonialist? What is that? What exactly is that?
Mhm. So, a ceremonialist is someone who uses ceremony as a way to support, deep transformation in our lives and also to really demarcate the specialness of our lives and different, life stages and cycles. And, so I am an ordained priest. I'm also an ordained priestess and the ceremonialist comes in as a way to really honor those thresholds, whether you're going through a marriage or a divorce or having a new baby or you're going through menopause or you're becoming a new mother, these different opportunities to bring ceremony, which again can be very human. It doesn't have to be like, what I mean? Like all the bells and whistles and in a church. It can be in your own home, for example, where the new mama is being encircled by a group of women because she's welcoming a baby. And so it's really bringing more of the rite of passage, that we knew and when we were much more close to extended family or villages or, more of the indigenous ways where ceremony was a part of our daily living structure. We might even, while we were making a meal together, sing, like that can be ceremony. Or when a parent and child are together and they take an opportunity to just, again, demarcate that child is becoming, a new age or a new stage and what that means. And really to honor and bring meaning back into people's lives and have people remember we are the meaning makers of our lives. And ceremony can be what kind of holds that and really says, look, your life is precious, absolutely precious. And how do you want to, make sure you remember that? Because if we don't remember that our lives are precious and sacred, we're going to be the first ones to not take care of ourselves, to give a rat's ass, excuse my language, about, anything, and certainly not show up in the world giving our best, realizing we do have an impact and we do make a difference in the lives of others and the world.
So it's more like celebration of those very unique moments that we cross. And how interesting, when you were talking as a young child, you were running to nature to be alone and kind of deal with this thing. But this brings the absolute necessity of having people around you that celebrate with you, that are powerful in your circle, because we are very social creatures. So those are very two different ends when you look at it. Like me, somebody who doesn't do these ceremonies or doesn't fully understand, it's fascinating to me, because there are two levels of that. You can find your peace in the nature, but you can also find your peace in celebrating these moments with the right people around you.
Yeah, community, the medicine of community. And so, there's so much research now and so much conversation about how we've lost that connection with community and how it's changed mental health because of it.
Oh, yeah.
Because the community can absorb those who are on the fringe, for example, and don't quite know how to fit in. The community just absorbs that, because they know that everybody doesn't have to act and be all the same, and everybody's welcome. And the community is also the one to say, you know what, your behavior is not okay. It's hurting people. It's, impacting our well-being as a society. And so the community also has influence in that way, where it sort of course corrects when people are really out of touch, with their inner kindness and their own well-being. And so there's so much around that. And I was just, I'm preparing to go to Poland, my true motherland, for the first time. And I swear the computer world, like, I went on to watch a movie the other day, and out of nowhere there's this movie of, from Poland. And I'm like, I've never ever in my life watched a movie from Poland. But there was some beautiful scenes going on of a smaller town in Poland, and they were celebrating, and they were all dressed, in traditional clothes, dancing and singing. And like, that to me is the ultimate ceremony, when we come together to celebrate life, and to honor often different seasons or holidays, etc., together. It's really,
Yeah, I
really
think
important.
it goes back to accepting yourself and be aware of that we go through changes. That's why I call my podcast Third Chances, because I don't believe we deserve second chance. I believe we deserve as many chances as we have or want throughout our life, because there's never too late to change anything that doesn't work for you. And in this sense, when you were talking about the community and the importance of it, I don't know what you think about it, but I believe the social media world, the internet world, got us. It's the parody of life, because we are so connected that we never have been connected like this before in the history of the world. Because we used to have to send letters and wait for days to respond, and we didn't have a phones, and so you have to send somebody to get the message somewhere and wait for the response. This speed up everything, but in a sense, we are the most disconnected we have ever been. So how is that working? Because you are running to nature, or you are celebrating and doing ceremonies that make people aware. This is your life now. This is the moment you should treasure and remember. You are actually teaching them to realize that the now time is the most important. Not if somebody likes your post on Facebook, or if whatever we are seeking and scrolling and just putting a lot of noise into our head, that we need to kind of ground ourselves into some peace, because it can drive you nuts. Is it part of your work? to make people happy or be infectious with happiness?
Mm, mm, mm. It's so interesting because, I've had sort of a love-hate relationship with social media and technology, and definitely as a mother watching its impact on my children, and I have discovered without any question of a doubt, like we can bring all that we are into technology
Yeah.
if we choose to. So these conversations like you and I are having, like we can go as deep and sincere as we choose to. And so it really is up to the person how they're going to interact, how they're going to use these modalities that aren't going to go away. These
Yeah.
they're only going to amp up higher and faster. And so it reminds me, because for a while I used to be like, get rid of all media in our house. And it wasn't practical.
No, you can ignore the practice, of course.
And I missed it too. I'm like, but I have to say, so I ran because of COVID, I turned, a lot of things went online for me with my work. And one of those was my groups. And so I had a group that ran for close to 4 years of women. And we did some of the most beautiful work together. It was so deep. And it just confirmed for me, even though at times women would be like, oh, how can this be healing? Or how can this really go, you know what I mean? And be transformative. I'm like, watch and see, watch and see. And so it reminded me this, like you're saying, of what we exude. We can exude this irrespective of what it's going into, whether it's going into a screen or it's going into a person who's sitting right next to us. It's all coming from that same place. And if we have the intention to be deep and authentic together and to really sincerely connect, like heartfully, we will. Nothing can stop us. So I certainly have a lot of boundaries around technology because it has its impact on me. And if I notice that I'm suddenly like becoming mindless about it, but that's my job to monitor that for myself, to make sure my deeper intention, which is that I will always connect honestly with others and deeply and soulfully and humanly, then I will.
You touched on something that was very, very difficult for me as well, because I was always, in my previous careers, I always preferred to deal with people face to face. When COVID hit, I was coaching, and I was coaching with local people, one-on-one. We would meet somewhere in a coffee shop because I always wanted them to get out of their environment that they are used to and be in a natural, like neutral space. And then COVID hit and none of it was possible. And I literally didn't exist on social media. I was not somebody who would like that space. And it just completely, and what you said, like you can choose to be authentic or you can choose to be trying to be someone else, which is gonna turn out awkward. And I had that difficulty at the beginning to find my voice that I never had issue with. But suddenly, like I had a difficulty to put out a video because what do I say? Who is watching this? Who am I talking to? I had no idea because I was good with people connection because I can read your, you read your body language. I can respond to what you say. It's so much more meaningful to me because I have that person in front of me and I can see if something didn't land well and correct myself, whatever it is. And I didn't have any of that online. And so you just reminded me how super difficult this was for me to figure out how do I present myself. And of course, we are kind of conscious about some trolls and whatever. Not that it mattered to me what some stranger that I never met think of me, but still we are, we don't like to be hated on or commented stupidly. But it was tough. And I don't know if you can imagine, but it took me a few years to realize I can use social media to connect with somebody on a deeper level and still take it offline. Well, semi, because we are still online talking to each other, but we are having conversation with each other face to face, even though it's online. And that didn't occur to me for quite some time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Because I have met many people that I resonated with. And it never occurred to me that we can take it off that platform and we can call each other and just connect that on a much deeper level. So thank God I figured it out, because that's when, you know, my podcast started, and something that I always loved, that interviewing people and learn about their stories and journey. It's just unbelievable that sometimes the simplest things don't even occur to you.
And you know what you're pointing out too is like, how do we transition to a, you know, a way of being together that we're not used to? It takes time because our body and like everything in us is going, wait, I can't
Yeah,
like see you, I can't feel you. And that is important to take that slowly and exactly as you did, you know, to realize like, oh, this is awkward, this is different than I'm used to, because the senses we're used to using, we now have to, you know, step into a different capacity with, and then
yeah.
it's all there. No matter where we go, what we do, it is all there, and we get to learn those skills and
Yeah.
refine
And
how we
for the
connect.
longest time, and that was my story, of course, like everything else. I assumed I can do the similar help in coaching
Mm,
when I'm not sitting in front of that person, when I cannot hug her, when I can't be there responding to her emotions uh, more properly than on a Zoom call. Well, guess what? I had a client that was from California, and yes, it was possible. It was different, but you start learning that you're looking for different things, and it just you adjust to situation. And I think that's one of the best things why I used to call myself master of reinvention. We can reinvent anything we don't like about ourselves and adjust, because we need to. Life is never the same. Life is never staying stagnant. It's either we are either growing or dying. So we have to either go with flow like you did, to accept the technology that it's just here to stay,
yeah.
and use it the way you see it fit. That's where your decision comes from. That's, you can use food for comfort or as an enemy. You can use anything else in life that we have that is absolutely spectacular, and others take it and kill with it. It's, you know, it's always the choice of that person to use this nature, whatever we have available. You can appreciate it or you can see it as an enemy.
So well said. You know, and it's making me think of a jaw-dropping direct experience when it caused me to not question anymore of like the impact we can have, you know, via technology. So I have this embodiment practice that I developed called the Wombing Sanctuary, and it is where one woman is at the center and women are around her, and they're energetically and physically, you know, holding her, supporting her, leaning in, whispering, you know, words into her ears, putting their hands on her, etc., and really like tuning into what this woman at the center needs for support, and doing this all non-verbally. So, you know, again, when you're in person, it's so tactile, it's so of the body, you know, when the women are going through so many emotions, and
The
really
energy
being
is there surrounding you. Yeah.
exactly. And I never thought, I was like, well, what would this look like online? And then, you know, we started doing this regularly in my women's group. And so we would do it once a month. And I don't want to say it was even more powerful, because I don't mean that. It's just different.
Yeah.
But it was mind blowing. Like there would be times I would just step back, because often, you know, we would have our eyes closed during it. I would open my eyes and just look at the women on the screen and what was happening. And literally, one woman we were holding at center, you know, and everyone was just tuning in. And at the end, when we would kind of share what we felt, it was always profound, the amount
We
of,
are
of
so
the
powerful.
connection.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
how that woman at center felt it. she felt it. She opened, she received it. She was, transformed by it. And I just said, yeah, would you look at that? Like, never again do I need to question. And again, it comes back to what you shared. It's our intention.
Yeah.
If we're intending to, be of support service and be in the field, that
Yeah.
energetic field together, then nothing is off the table. Anything can really
It's
happen.
you have to tune in. And I have experienced, I have been trained by Tony Robbins, and in his organization, Magali Pesha is sharing extremely powerful guided meditations. And it's online, and it's people from all over the world. And I haven't been a master meditator, that's for sure. I had to learn my way to use meditation and to kind of force myself to stay still, because I was naturally the go, 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 which doesn't work well. And I have attended several of these sessions. It was several hundred people on call. And obviously, like, you can sit back and just watch and don't get involved. But when you do, and when you really let it get into you, you forget it's online. You forget that she's not there, and it impacts you, just like the prayer circles are powerful, because that energy still goes to that person that needs it. And no matter what anybody thinks, it's we can really heal and help people around us with kindness, or with really mean words. And words are very powerful and hurtful sometimes. I don't know if you ever saw, I've seen it multiple times. There was some experiment that some school did, that they had two plants that they were nurturing and taking care of with kids. And one, they ask kids to speak mean words to it. I hate you. You are so ugly. You absolutely, you don't, like, look at yourself. You don't even deserve to be in the plant world. And look, you are a joke. And the other plant, that was exactly the same species that was taken care of the same. They were meant to speak kindly about, you are so beautiful. Look at you, your shiny leaves and everything. And it may sound as a joke to many people that don't even ever stop and think about these things. But that plant that was taught to mean in mean words started dying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only difference was the energy around it. And it was so powerful to realize that for me, when I look at it, because I have seen it, and they took documentation of it. They took every day, they took a picture of how that plant was progressing and how the other was growing. And imagine what it does to people. And we do it all the time. Judgment, snap judgment. We have no idea what people are going through, yet we form some opinion about them based on whatever we think that they may be, without even knowing them. And it's so, and especially on social media, it could be very, very pronounced, because people feel safe behind their keyboard, and they would say things that they would never say if they were facing that person face to face. I would hope not.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that,
because it creates that anonymity where you think like, oh, yeah, I don't have to take responsibility for this, and I can just say whatever and walk away. And yeah, I do recall seeing and that particular experiment, as well as the ones with water, that have been so profound, and literally
yes,
how the crystals of water change. And it's just reminding me as well, it's like, it's our presence, even if we're not speaking, even if we're not doing anything, it's our presence and how we are holding ourselves and being in relationship to ourselves, that it impacts everything around us. Because again, plants, beyond speech, like, they're not going to talk back to us in that way, but they feel what we are holding and what
The
we're,
energy, the energy.
emitting.
Yeah.
And so it's just a really powerful thing when we realize in some of the deepest ways, and this comes up, this is probably one of the biggest things that comes up in my work with women, is how we're talking to ourselves
Oh yeah.
inside.
Oh
And
yeah.
when we really realize that we are our worst perpetrators, we are our most condescending,
Yeah.
and self-critical to ourselves, that's a journey that doesn't change overnight. It's when we have to walk with really for the rest of
Mm.
our lives and lovingly, change how we're
We
gonna
do that. That's true.
respond.
Yeah. That's one of the most powerful exercise I do sometimes with the women that are really having very bad back talk or inner talk, is to write down exactly what they are saying to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go through it, and she needs to read it aloud, which is, it sounds differently when you have it in your mind or when you read it. And it's some of the most powerful breakthroughs when we realize how we talk to ourselves. No wonder we feel the way we feel. And then I would ask them, would you talk like this to your best friend?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, that breaks you, because you realize you are treating yourself as the worst enemy. You will probably not even talk to your enemy the way you talk to yourself. I don't know how is that possible, but it somehow feels like a nature, or we have the tendency to go to the most negative instead of positive. So how do we, if we can leave our audience with maybe one practical tool to how do we take charge of what's going on, that inner chat in our head, to refocus on something that is actually useful and beneficial to our health and mood and everything else around us? Would there be one practice maybe that you can share that can help somebody to do it right now at home, so they, if they are not ready to reach out for help yet, like yours, or they can just try it out so they can see that it actually works and reach out? Because usually we find out that we can't do it by ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, even just taking what we were just speaking about with that self-talk, developing a new relationship with the critic, in us, or really the abuser. It's an abuser.
Yeah.
Um, you know, we absorb so much, and often we'll get to, this time in our lives, maybe it's midlife, etc., where we're like, oh my god, we're so much more aware of what's going on inside because we've been living with ourselves for so long.
Yeah.
So we're more in tune with it, and that's when we just start realizing, like, we can't throw the abuser out. We have to be the ones to start talking differently, both to the abuser but also to the abused. And those are the same thing. Like, the abused hurt one in us is also the abuser, and vice versa. And so, one of the biggest things for me is I'll just put my hand when I can feel that little agitation or that little voice that I'm like, wait a second, who's trying to slip in right now? And I just close my eyes. I put my hand to my heart. I take some deep breaths. And I always imagine, that I am the sweetest, most nurturing mother to this one inside. And I'm like, oh, sweetie, you must be hurting so much to feel like you have to talk that way to me, and ultimately to yourself. So
That's
it's like,
beautiful. Yeah.
it's a very simple, but it's that really realizing we can acknowledge this, we can be with this part of ourselves, we can do this. We
Yeah.
can look at the most painful aspect of who we are straight in the eyes and really, give it that kindest, most loving and nurturing, touch, presence. Again, back to
The
presence.
presence, it requires you to be aware of it. I think the instinct that many people have is to push it away, which doesn't resolve anything. So what you're saying, I imagine it forces you to kind of stop and acknowledge what you feel, where you feel it, and what it does in your body, and acknowledge that space and basically concentrate on that and accept it, that it's part of you, and work through it. That's completely different than what most people would do. It's just like, oh, I feel sad, so I'm just like, push it away or do something. Of course, it helps when you refocus on something different, but it's not working for everybody. When you have trauma or panic attack or something that is really irrational, and like when you have panic attacks, and I'm not expert on these things at all, but I know people that do, and it's not that they don't rationalize that it's irrational to have fear of something that is not even there, but they can help it in that moment. So is this what you do, able to help people like that to kind of be able to manage their mindset in those moments, and learn how to be in charge of that instead of being run by that?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'm just going to grab my cord. I see my computer's almost out of juice. It's right here. Let me just plug that in. Yeah. The leaning in towards that which is most uncomfortable, and is always what I first go to. And at first, because yeah, absolutely, we can be there for ourselves through anything. And at first, it's really essential to have someone remind us that we can do that, because often our body will go into this like true anxiety, panic, overwhelm, trauma response. And so to have somebody there, because often somebody wasn't there when the trauma happened, now they can be there to be like, you can do this with and for yourself. And then you turn towards what is most uncomfortable, and as, somebody's supporter, I'm just right there saying, I'm right here with you. I'm not going to walk away from you. I'm right here. You can turn towards this, which you didn't think you could, because you're so used to running away. And then, yeah, when someone just even for the first time is like, oh, discovers they can turn towards what was so, panicky and terrifying, then like from there, it's a game changer. Everything starts to change, because it's that initial, like, I can't. And then when we do, everything changes. And,
and it's empowering, isn't it?
So empowering, because you won't abandon yourself ever again, and therefore nobody can actually abandon you, because you're ultimately you're the only one who can truly abandon yourself. And so therefore other people's things that they do, which are gonna hurt, but it won't ever be that deep primal wound, core hurt ever again, because it won't touch there.
This is fascinating, Sharon. And I want to ask you, because we kind of touched on that you do women groups. How exactly does it look like when someone decides to work with you? What can they expect? How does it look like? What you're doing that can accommodate their needs?
Yeah. So I work with women. I've worked with women for over 25 years. And women will turn to me, kind of what we were just talking about, when they are done running around outside themselves, when they're done trying to look for the next method or modality, or take the next class, or work with the next teacher. And they're like, I'm so done. Nothing is, things change for sure, but not in that core place. That's when they usually find me or turn to me. And so what it can look like is, I work one-on-one with women. I also work in small groups and do retreats. And that one-on-one work is the one, usually women will want to begin at that, because that's the place where we can go the deepest. And it looks like even just what we talked about, where I'm showing up to help and support a woman to understand what is possible when she starts to change her relationship with her own self and with her, with her body. Because really that's the place that we must start with, because from the body, we then can work with the mind and our thoughts. But if we're not in touch with the body and the body's sensations and the body's trauma responses and our symptoms and our illnesses and the unexplainable things that we go through, then, the mind has a certain part in that, but we have to have a relationship with our body because it's our base. Here we are in it. It's what we talk through, we live through, we connect with others through. And so I really support a woman to kind of come back home and get in touch with feeling good in her own skin, you know.
Paying attention to what her body is telling her. Yeah,
Yes.
that's.
Yeah.
And I remember that you have a retreat coming up in Croatia. You want to talk about it a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So, beginning of September of this year, 2024, a woman who has this amazing villa, it's her family's villa, so it goes back many generations, and she is now turning it into a retreat facility. So, she's going to be doing this beautiful festival called the Tidal Flow Women's Festival. And she has 14 international facilitators coming in to do a whole variety of gorgeous things: yoga, sound healing, meditation. I'm going to be doing what we spoke about, this wombing sanctuary, but in the Mediterranean Sea. So, you know, we're going to be floating each other and holding each other in the waters of the sea. And
that sounds beautiful.
and singing and doing, you know, this real deep, you know, ceremonial honoring of a woman and her body and her deep presence to herself. So that is happening in September. And yeah, that is my main retreat for this year, because that's going to be a big one. I have never traveled to Europe before.
You didn't? Oh, wow.
No.
Wow, that's gonna be big surprise because the world seems to be different. Well, and then you're planning your trip to Poland. When is that gonna come up? Do you know?
So I'll go right after the Women's Festival.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll spend a week in Croatia and a week in Poland.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's gonna be a huge month for you.
Yes, it is. I know. I'm already aware. I can feel it. I'm like, whoo, this is gonna be, yeah, my own initiation. I'll go from
A
the
lot of
Mediterranean
experience.
Sea up to
Yeah.
the Baltic Sea and just, yeah,
Oh,
let
gosh.
life,
Yeah.
transform me.
Unbelievable. Well, I will post all the links and all the information about your website and the connections to the show notes of this episode. So if anybody feel intrigued with what we talked about with Sharon and believe that, you know, she resonated with you and that may be exactly what you need right now, I will encourage you to reach out and talk to Sharon. As you see, she's very easy to talk to. And you may just see where you're gonna fit, what is the best way, what is the best approach to start, and see how she can help you. I think it would be wonderful. I don't believe we have enough of this quiet getting back to ourselves in this very busy, noisy world. And like I said, especially women, we feel we have to be on the go, we have lists to do, and we have no time for ourselves to take 5 minutes. If you know, we are helping everybody else, but you cannot pour from empty cup. You have to refill your cup first before you can help somebody else. Just like in the airlines, you are supposed to take the air mask on you first before you run out of gas, you know, air to help somebody else. So I think this is extremely important in this very fast-paced world to kind of reconnect with what we came from. And I was fascinated by Sharon. And like I said, it wasn't my nature to be there in this space. I was the one pushing through emotions. I was the one strong and I can deal with this. And let me tell you, it actually gets you. It eventually, if you don't listen to your body will tell you louder and louder. And if you don't listen still, it will eventually stop you in what you're doing. And it will force you. Don't let it go that far.
Yes, and I know that one as well. That's a conversation we'll have another day, won't we? Because yeah, that's real.
It is, because we are getting messages all the time, and lessons. And if we don't listen to them, then boom. Yeah. I would just encourage everybody to take better care of ourselves because we need it. I always talk about, excuse me, the last few years were extremely difficult on everybody, not only economically and health-wise and stress-wise, of course, but just a little thing that we touched on, the loss of community on top of that. We didn't have that support. Everything was upside down. People were losing lives, jobs, relationships, and that's way too much concentrated negativity on anybody. So we need to return back to some grounding and to realize what our life is really about and take charge of our health, mindset, and the peace in us to be able to really do the best in this world. I would like to ask you if you want to part ways with something that you want to say, because you are a poet and a writer, and just, you know, let's part on something beautiful that people can take away with.
Well, I want to thank you. You know, this really, from the moment that we connected, I felt such a kindred connection with you. And so this conversation is just a continuation of that. And I just really appreciate who you are and what you stand for in the world and your own life story. So thank you. And what I want to share is, may we be so gracious to ourselves, you know. And when we think we can't soften just a little more to, you know, who we are, what we're feeling, what we're going through, may we put our hand on our heart and say, like, it's okay, sweetie. It's okay. Just be here. Just breathe. Just let life take care of you. You know?
I don't think any of us do that enough. That's for sure. So let this be a reminder of taking care of ourselves first, you know, and it's really probably the most important message that I feel that came out from this podcast, meeting Sharon. It starts with us, you know. It's when you are strong, when you know who you are, when you are comfortable in your skin, you don't have to search for the newest fashion. You don't have to soothe yourself with food. You don't have to go and buy stuff to make yourself feel good. You are good because you know who you are. And that's a huge difference. And I just believe that's where we all started, and we can influence the world one person at a time. Because when I met Sharon, there is this energy that floats between us that I was constantly calmed down. And that's not my natural state. I have done a lot of work on myself, but it's still, there's some hyper kind of energy in me that feels guilty when I don't do this or do that. And I learned over years that I must force myself to take a break and go outside or go to the pool or do something for me. It doesn't have to be, you know, bubble bath and champagne. It's whatever it is for everybody.
Yeah.
But just take those few minutes for yourself, because it is so important to anybody around you. That's what you project to the world. And that's how you can help people without even saying a word. Because I believe this is highly infectious, this energy. And I can see it around me when I watch people and they have all these like desperate, upset face. And I'm thinking, what is going on in your life that you go outside and you project this on your face? Then gotta be deep misery and pain inside of that person. And if we can touch just one soul, would be a really, really big deal.
Yeah, we need each other, don't we? We really need each other's gifts and talents, and we need each other being naturally at home in ourselves, because going back to that beautiful, experiment you spoke about of the children and the plant, what are we saying to each other otherwise? And when we're coming from that incredibly self-gracious, self-kind, and caring place, it actually isn't even self-care anymore. It's collective care, and because it's acknowledging like our presence when we're in this, soft, calm quietude, that changes the world,
Absolutely.
changes it. And so it's collective care. And I think there's an important thing, because when people presume it's like, oh, we're just taking care of ourselves. No, like you said, this emanates from you, and we need each other's like highest, most beautiful purity right now, because people are suffering so deeply.
This is very important what you said, because many women feel almost guilty to take time for themselves. So if you are one of those women that believe I can't do this because my husband needs me, my kids need me, I at work, what Sharon just said is so profound, because this is collective care. If you are anxious, stressed out mother, your kids are projecting that, and it has impact on them. It has impact on your relationship. It has impact on your health. If you are sick, you are not going to helping anybody. And when you find this calmness in you and find the power to be taking care of yourself first, so you can take care of everything else, you will be more effective in work. You will be more happy around people. People will be infected by that. And that's a huge, huge, huge thing. So look at it as a collective care, because that's I think I love this. That's absolutely profound. Yeah. So don't feel like selfish if you're taking care of yourself. Sharon, this was absolutely joyful. Thank you so much. I hope that people find this interesting as much as I did. And we need that reminder often, that in this very fast-paced world, that there is a nature and its rules, and we are part of it. So maybe we just need to remind ourselves that the trees are sitting there. It doesn't care what another tree thinks of them. They are just there standing, being the beautiful tree they are. So maybe less comparing and less stressing about what we should, and just let's take care of ourselves first.
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you, Vera. This was so lovely.
Thank you so much. This was fun. And like I said, if you feel compelled, if you resonated with Sharon, please reach out. I will post all the contact information in the show notes, and her website, the connection to her books, and everything. If you want to start with the book and then later reach out, whatever it is, I think we all need this badly in this world, to kind of be the lighthouse for others. And let that be our message today.
Beautiful.
Thank you.